Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist and today I'm going to be doing an Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon deck profile. So I'm really excited to do this for you guys because this deck is a really awesome deck that was actually suggested to me by one of my patrons, Tyler. And this deck is a super awesome deck because it's based around this awesome boss monster, Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon, which was actually the boss monster of the main character of Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5. So, without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards like getting your name description in every single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month you're a patron along with test hands. And definitely give Tyler some love down in the comments down below for suggesting such an awesome deck. So, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're playing two copies of Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon. So Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon is one of the stars in the show in this deck. So what this card actually does is you can reduce the battle damage you take from an attack involving a pendulum monster you control to 0. And then during the end phase, you can destroy this card. And if you do, you add a pendulum monster with 1500 or less attack from your deck to your hand, which is really, really good to be able to just add that card from your deck to your hand. It helps out a lot to be able to destroy this card as well because it combos out with another monster in the deck, which is our Odd Eyes Arc Pendulum Dragon. This card has a very unique effect that works very well with our copies of our Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon. And what this card does is if an Odd Eyes card you control is destroyed by battle or by card effect, you can special summon one Odd Eyes monster from your hand, deck, or graveyard, which is a crazy good effect just to be able to special summon out an Odd Eyes directly from the deck because they're usually level 7 to 8 dragon monsters that pretty much have high attack points, usually 2500 or more. We then play 3 copies of Odd Eyes Revolution Dragon. Odd Eyes Revolution Dragon is actually a searcher for the deck. You look at this card and you think, wow, that's a really good boss monster, but you never actually summon it. It's really good because it is a scale 12, but it also has a very unique ability that all of this text on it basically doesn't matter because you're only ever going to use the main effect that once per turn, you can discard this card from your hand, pay 500 life points, and then add a level 8 or lower dragon pendulum monster from your deck to your hand. That's the only effect on this card that you're ever really going to use, is to be able to get a search by discarding this card. We then play 3 copies of my personal favorite of all the Odd Eyes monsters, and that's 3 copies of Odd Eyes Persona Dragon. Odd Eyes Persona Dragon is awesome because of its monster effect. You get to once per turn quick effect, target one face-up monster on the field that was special summoned from the extra deck, and it has its effects negated until the end phase of this turn. This card is literally a walking negate. It has 2400 defense. It's a great card in this deck because it's a low scale, and also it's great to special summon this card during the end phase off your copy of your Arc Pendulum. Once your copy of your regular Odd Eyes pops on the field, special summon this in defense position and it gives you an additional negate, which is really good, and you guys will definitely see that in the test hands for this deck. We then play a single copy of Odd Eyes Phantom Dragon, which is my favorite out of all the artworks of these cards. And this card is a pretty good card because it has the ability that when it's in the Pendulum Zone, you can once per turn, when an attack is declared involving your face-up monster and an opponent's monster, if you have an Odd Eyes card in your other Pendulum Zone, you can make that monster you control gain 1200 attack until the end phase, enter the battle phase, which is a pretty good effect because usually your Odd Eyes monsters have about 2500 attack points, so you can boost them up to around 3700 attack points, which is pretty good. It also has a really neat monster effect that when this Pendulum Summon card inflicts battle damage to your opponent by attacking, you can inflict damage to your opponents equal to the number of Odd Eyes cards in your Pendulum Zone times 1200. So you can do an additional 2400 points of burn damage to your opponent when this card attacks, which is pretty good. We then play a single copy of Odd Eyes Phantasm Dragon. This card is a really neat card for this deck as well. I like just playing it as a one-of in this deck because it has the pendulum effect that you can discard a card to add a face-up dragon pendulum monster from your extra deck to your hand, which comes up every so often in this deck just to get you that additional card to your hand. It has a really neat monster effect as well that if you have 2 cards in your Pendulum Zone and a face-up Odd Eyes pendulum monster in your extra deck, you can special summon this card from your hand, but you can't pendulum summon the turn you activate this effect. And then during damage calculation, if this card attacks an opponent's monster, you can make that opponent's monster lose 1000 attack for each face-up pendulum monster in your extra deck, and then during the damage calculation only. which is a really good effect just to get through some really powerful monsters, which is why you just play this at 1 because you can search it when you need it. We then play a single copy of Perform Pal Odd Eyes Dissolver. This card is essentially a polymerization because it has the Pendulum effect that you can once per turn fusion summon a Dragon Fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as fusion material. It's a really good effect because you can actually go into one of the most powerful cards in the entire deck in the form of our Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon. So that's pretty much it for your Odd Eyes cards. Getting into the other cards we play 3 copies of the Supreme King Darkworm. Supreme King Darkworm helps out in the deck a lot because it has a very awesome effect that when it's normal or special summon, you get to add one of your Supreme King Gates from your deck to your hand, which can be a high scale or low scale, depending on what you need. It also has a very neat effect that if this card is in the graveyard and you don't control a monster, you can special summon this card back to your side of the field, and then its effect will go off to search that Pendulum scale as well, which is a great effect for this deck to have, just to give you that additional search of getting the exact scale that you need. We then play 2 copies of Supreme King Gate 0. The reason I play Gate 0 in this deck at 2 is because it is a level 7 monster, so it's never bad to actually see this card in your hand. As long as you have 1 in the deck, it's totally fine, because if you add it to hand, you have a scale 0, which comes in very handy in this deck just to give you that additional play that you might need, because a lot of your cards that are magic cards in this deck are actually searchers, so this card comes in handy to grab the exact low scale that you need when you need it. We then play a single copy of Supreme King Gate Infinity. This is a scale 13, so the reason I play this is for the high scale because it is searchable. But the only downside of this card is if you control a monster, you cannot Pendulum summon monsters, which is the only downside of this card, but usually you're going to use this card's effect when you don't control monsters to Pendulum summon or search this card to give you an additional monster on your side of the field. We then play 2 copies of Perform Pal Skullcrabat Joker. This is one of the only normal summons outside of the Darkworm that you're ever going to use in this deck, because you normal summon this card to your side of the field to add a Perform Pal Magician or a Pendulum monster or an Odd Eyes monster from your deck to your hand. So you can normal summon this card out to your side of the field and literally search the entire top row, which is really amazing. We then play a single copy of Perform Pal Odd Eyes Synchron, which is still, I think to this day, one of the only cards that's a member of 3 different archetypes at once: the Perform Pal, the Odd Eyes, and the Synchron archetype. And it's technically a Pendulum monster, so it technically is 4, which is kind of neat. But basically, you're just playing this in the deck because it is a tuner monster, so it helps you go into some really neat plays. Like, for example, you can use this card with your Persona Dragon to go to 7s. You can use this card with your Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon to go into 9s. You can go into some really interesting plays with this card in this deck. We then play a single copy of Odd Eyes Wizard Dragon, which was actually suggested to me by Tyler. And this is a really awesome card for this deck. I really didn't like this card to begin with because it's not a Pendulum monster, but the more I look at this card, the more I really like it in this deck, because what it does is if this card is in your hand, you can tribute a dark monster and send any Odd Eyes Dragon from your hand, deck, or face up from your field to the graveyard, and if you do, special summon this card. And if this card in your possession is destroyed by an opponent's card and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon 1 Odd Eyes monster from your deck or graveyard, except another copy of itself, then add 1 Phantasm Flame Strike or Spiral Flame Strike from your deck to your hand. It gives you a search, for if it gets destroyed, you get a search card. It also gives you the ability to special summon an Odd Eyes, and it also Foolish Burial is a card. That's really good. You can even Pendulum summon this card out to your side of the field, so it's not even that bad to just Pendulum summon this card out to your side of the field, which is why I really like this card now as a 1-of in this deck, and I'm really glad that Tyler actually suggested this card to me, because before I wasn't playing this in the deck, and it's a really good card for this build. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. The majority of the spells are actually searchers. So for the spells, we're going to be playing a single copy of Foolish Burial. This gets your Darkworm to the graveyard so you can go into more plays. Same thing with Dragon Shrine. You're basically just using these to get your Darkworm to the graveyard to give you a monster on your side of the field. We're then playing a single copy of Odd Eyes Fusion. This is here basically to go into your copy of your Vortex Dragon, and it helps out a lot because it actually has the ability to use monsters from the extra deck if your opponent controls 2 or more monsters and you don't control a monster. You can also use 2 Odd Eyes monsters from your extra deck as fusion materials as well, which is pretty good. We then play a single copy of Pendulum Fusion. Pendulum Fusion is really neat because it lets you fusion summon one fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters you control as fusion material. But if you have 2 cards in your Pendulum Zone, you can also use the cards in your Pendulum Zone as materials as well, which is pretty good to kind of clear your Pendulum scales and go for more plays. And this card comes in very handy in this deck to go into your copy of Vortex or your Gatling Ghoul. We then play 2 copies of Duelist Alliance. Duelist Alliance is good in this deck because it actually searches any Pendulum monster. So it can search out Arc Pendulum, it can search out Odd Eyes Pendulum. If it says Pendulum in the name and it is a Pendulum monster, this card can actually search it, and it can search Pendulum spell or traps, which is really good as well, like Pendulum Fusion. We then play a single copy of Terraforming. Terraforming is basically here to search the best field spell in the entire deck, which is 3 copies of our Sky Iris. Sky Iris is an absolutely insane field spell, and one of the best field spells, in my opinion, in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because it makes it so that you cannot target Magician, Perform Pal, or Odd Eyes cards in your Pendulum Zone with card effects, so it protects your scales, which is already great. And it also has the ability that you can target one other face-up card you control, destroy it, and if you do, add an Odd Eyes card from your deck to your hand, which is a great effect, because it's going to search literally any of the Odd Eyes cards from your deck, and if you have Arc Pendulum on your side of the field, it's going to give you a plus, because you're going to get special summon an Odd Eyes from the deck as well, while you're also getting a search off of popping 1 card, which is really great. We then play 3 copies of Spiral Flame Strike, which is a searcher for the deck that lets us add from our deck to our hand an Odd Eyes monster that's level 7, which is a great effect, or a face-up level 7 Odd Eyes Pendulum monster from our extra deck to our hand, from our extra deck, which is pretty good. And also has the ability, if you control an Odd Eyes card, you can target a card on the field and destroy it. So this is one of the best searchers in the entire game, because it not only has the ability to pop something, but it also has the ability to search something, which is usually kind of odd for cards. We then play 3 copies of Summoner's Art. Summoner's Art is basically here to search the best card in the entire deck, which is our copies of Arc Pendulum, because Arc Pendulum is really needed because you can go into some really insane plays in this deck when you do have Arc Pendulum on your Pendulum scale. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to be playing 2 copies of Vortex Dragon, which is basically just a walking negate, which is really good for this deck. Play a single copy of Perform Pal Gatling Ghoul. Gatling Ghoul is here because it does a little bit of burn damage. It has the ability that if this card is fusion summoned, you can inflict 200 points of damage to your opponent for each card on the field. Then if this card was fusion summoned using a Pendulum monster as material, you can destroy 1 monster your opponent controls. And if you do inflict damage to your opponent equal to the monster's original attack, which is really good, especially on a 2900 attack point monster. We then play a single copy of the Virtual World QB. I really like this card in this deck because there's a lot of instances where you'll have the Perform Pal Synchron on the field, and you'll have an Odd Eyes monster, and going into this card really helps out because the main effect of this card is any card sent from the field to the graveyard is banished instead. But our cards that go to the extra deck don't get banished, like our Pendulum monsters. But any card that's sent to the graveyard, it's fine for us for them to get banished. We then play a single copy of Meteor Burst because it combos very well with Absolute Dragon. It's actually pretty easy to legitimately synchro summon into this card with your copies of Persona Dragon and go directly into this card with your copies of your Odd Eyes Synchron. So this card comes in pretty handy in this deck. Play a single copy of the F.A. Dawn Dragster because it gives us spell and trap negates. And then one of my favorite cards in the entire deck to actually summon is Metaphys Horus. This card comes in really handy because this card has the ability, depending on the type of card that you use to synchro summon in this card, if you use an effect monster, you can target one other card on the field and negate its effects. And if you use a Pendulum monster to summon this card, your opponent chooses 1 monster they control and gives control of it to us, which is really good because then we can link summon with it. We then play a single copy of Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon. The only thing you're ever going to do with this is link it away so you can special summon a Vortex or a copy of Meteor Burst, but it does come up every so often, which is why I play so many level 7s. Play a single copy of Flare Metal Dragon because every time your opponent breathes, they're going to take 500. 1 copy of Doom Rider. Doom Rider comes in really handy too because once per turn, you can detach 2 materials from this card and target 1 face-up card on the field and destroy it. And if you destroy a monster, you can make 1 face-up monster you control gain attack equal to the destroyed monster's original level times 300 until the end of the next turn. And if this card has a dragon monster as a material, then you can activate this effect as a quick effect, which is a really good effect just to be able to pop something. This card is essentially Trident as a rank 7 in this deck. We then play a single copy of Appaloosa for the Link Arrows, and you can usually go into this card pretty easily during your opponent's turn with IP Masquerena, and so this card comes in very handy. I play a single copy of the Blackluster Soldier, Soldier of Chaos. You don't have to play this, I just really like it in this deck. You can change it out out for like the Tenyi Link 3 for the arrows if you want to change it out for that. But I really like this card in this deck because it comes in handy to be able to summon out a really powerful Link monster. Lay a single copy of Unicorn to spin stuff, one copy of the Erratic Seal to actually bounce stuff, and give us our copy of Wizard Dragon onto our side of the field, and a single copy of IP Masquerena, because you can go into your copy of Nightmare Unicorn or Appaloosa with this card during your opponent's turn to give you some absolutely insane card advantage. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. It's a really fun deck to play around with. I hope you give Odd Eyes a try. It's really fun to play around with, and I'm really glad that Tyler actually suggested this one, because this deck is a blast to play with. I didn't play as many Pendulum Magicians as I did last time, and wanted to go a little bit more pure, more towards the Odd Eyes monsters for this particular build, because I did do a version where I did play Pendulum Magicians in here, like Harmonizing Magician and stuff like that, but I wanted to change it up a little bit for you guys and play a little bit closer to the Odd Eyes monsters, and I think it worked out really well, and you guys will definitely think so when you see the test hands, so be on the lookout for those. So anyways, guys, this is Dark Arm Duels. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of Notification Squad, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.